Graffiti and faith, the belief in a higher power, are two things that seemingly have nothing to do with each other. And some of you guys watching this might find it disrespectful to even include faith in the same sentence as an illegal act like graffiti. But even with that said, I can tell you that there's a lot of us out there who go out into those streets and hit up, do our thing, but also believe in something bigger than us all. But before we speak on faith any further, I do want to tell you guys that the point of this video is not to preach to you guys, and it's not to get you guys to believe in something you don't believe in already. But I do feel like this connection between belief and faith and graffiti needs further exploration. And in this video, we're going to explore it. So let's get into it. However, I feel like before we speak on this any further, some more context is needed. And the context that's maybe needed is why anybody would see any kind of contradiction in some kind of form of artistic expression and faith. And Graff being illegal is this central contradiction in my mind. And this might not be an issue anywhere else, but in America, the predominant forms of religious worship are Abrahamic. And Abrahamic religions come with a lot of rules, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. And many people in these religious communities, especially some of the religious elders of these communities, might frown upon people that go out and tag or just break the law in general. And they might ask, how does somebody that believes in God also go out there and break the law willingly? And I can say I understand this point of view completely. And that's because the first fool that I knew that was both a tagger and a believer in God similarly confused me. As I've talked about multiple times, my graffiti mentor was the homeboy E. And the homeboy E is of Mexican descent. He comes from a fairly traditional Mexican family that's Catholic. And from the jump, when me and E would be going places, when we'd just be walking around the mission or taking the bus somewhere, anytime this dude passed by a church, he would cross himself. I didn't give this kind of religious expression any kind of thought, and I was really thankful that he didn't expect me to do the same. Likewise, when his family would go to church on Sundays, I was definitely not required to go. I would go and take myself back home, play some video games, and just kick back, and then we'd get together and kick it after. However, I only became conflicted about the homeboy E's faith when we started tagging. And that's because we could be riding the J, we could be riding the 14, and this fool would bust a window shot, this fool would bust a panel shot, and if we passed by a church, he would still cross himself right after. And that had me looking at him like, dude, what the hell are you doing? If you're gonna do the second one, why are you doing the first? And I don't know if I ever asked him if there was any kind of contradiction in his mind, but I could tell you there couldn't have been any. And simply, my boy might not have had a very formalized notion of faith. It might have been something that was a cultural thing to him. It might have been something that he grew up doing, and it was just an accepted part of his life. And it could have been this way for the homeboy E, but the homeboy E possibly didn't even give it all that much thought. I knew the homeboy well enough to understand the things he did give a lot of thought to, like graffiti, like advancing his style, like talking to girls, like being able to iron some khakis down and get fly, and this maybe just didn't get the same thought. Considering my boy was like 13 or 14 years old during this time, it makes perfect sense if it didn't. And I can also tell you at this same time, I didn't have any kind of religious beliefs, period. And for almost the next decade, I didn't believe in God either. I was an atheist, and this is how I moved. But on the day of May 18th, 2006, something changed. On that day, I was sitting in a bar on Haight Street in San Francisco with my best friend, getting really faded. At that time, I was 22 years old and I was very conflicted about where my life was going, what I was doing with my life, and how to proceed. My best friend at the time was in college and he was studying linguistics, and he was telling me that he was going to try to pursue linguistics and the study of language as a profession. Personally, I was working a job I didn't give a damn about, but I was very passionate about writing books. And I was telling him, hey man, your path is a lot more straightforward. There's things you can do, like get your degree, get another degree, and further specialize and further study language and make a career out of it. But professionally pursuing creativity is not a linear process. There's a lot of twists and turns, and I understood that that's what my path was. Thinking about it like this and having this conversation made me sad. But to be honest with you guys, I was already sad anyway, even before the conversation. Up until that day, I had endured a 7 or 8 year period of depression. During this bout of depression that lasted years, I would have my ups and downs, but the downs were really down. And at best, I could get up in the morning, go to work, and come back home. But at worst, I couldn't leave the house, I couldn't leave my bed, and I just spent whole days staring at the wall, numb, feeling nothing. And when I went back home, I was thinking about the conversation that we had, and I was thinking about my friend's path and how simple it seemed in comparison to mine. And specifically, I was thinking about the part where I told him how hard my path was gonna be. And out of complete nowhere, I heard a voice tell me, "That's why your life has been so hard." And suddenly, everything I ever questioned, all the stuff I had been through, all the pain especially, that felt very senseless, made perfect sense. And for the next hour and a half, I couldn't do anything except cry my eyes out. But these weren't tears of sadness. I wasn't thinking about all the nonsense and all the pain I had endured. These were tears of joy, and I finally found my purpose and how to proceed in my life. And as simply as I can state it, I felt like everything had happened because it was supposed to happen, and there was a bigger architect of everything going on in my whole path in life. That person was not me. It was a higher power. And for maybe the next year and a half, I read every book that I could on religious philosophy. I can tell you Christianity in its many different forms absolutely didn't interest me, but things like Judaism, Sikhism, and especially Islam did. And after about a year and a half of doing all of this studying, I came to find my views in line with Islam, and especially the more mystical interpretations of my faith. However, even if I considered myself a Muslim, I considered myself a devotee of the law, I didn't necessarily act like it in any kind of outward way that anybody would recognize. And for the next 10 years or so, I didn't even take the Shahada until I was ready. But once I was ready, I formally became a Muslim, and I stand before you in this present moment as a Muslim. But going back to May 18, 2006, at that time, I was working on a book, which ended up becoming 5 books that never came out. And unfortunately, I moved away from creative endeavors. But this exile from creativity was not permanent, and in 2018, I started writing a book. This book is called The Painted Ladies, and it's been out for the last couple of years. And I can tell you, I created this YouTube channel as a way to promote myself and my book. But what I came to find is that people wanted to hear me talk about my life. They wanted to hear my stories, and my understanding about graffiti and my experience with it is what people wanted to hear the most. And anytime I ever talked about anything else, fools let me know they wanted to hear about Graff, they wanted to hear about the 90s, and they wanted to hear about my thoughts and my feelings about this craft. And in doing all these videos, thinking about Graff so much and being in contact with so many different writers, I find myself back in graffiti. And I also find absolutely no contradiction in being someone who hits up and believes in God. And that's 100% because of what it feels like when I hit up. Irrational things are not the easiest things to describe, and both faith and the feeling of hitting up aren't easy to describe because they're not rational. Faith especially involves believing in something that maybe you don't fully understand, that you only get little glimpses of here and there that validate what you feel. Similarly, it's not the most rational thing to need to go out and put your name on something you don't own and potentially surrender your freedom in the commission of doing so. And specifically, when I hit up, I feel something very far away from my rational brain, outside my brain completely and in my soul. And when I'm dedicated to doing so, it's automatic. It happens on its own, and the feelings happen on their own as well. And it's not that I feel like I'm worshiping God by hitting up, but I feel like I'm being the person I'm supposed to be. And back on May 18, 2006, I felt like I had been through all this because I wanted to be a writer. And what I didn't understand is that up until that point, I had been a writer already. And being a writer, whether I'm writing books or writing letters on a wall, is who I am. And while my first book that I have out now isn't about graffiti, you can be sure my next one will be. And maybe some of these other thoughts and some of these other feelings are gonna be in that book, or maybe it'll just be dope enough for that book to just be about Graff, to be about what we love and the potential of what we can do. But Graff can also be used to express your feelings of belief in a higher power and even to propagate this belief as well. And as a lot of you guys know, there's a writer out there whose name is Jesus Saves. I saw an interview with him that Bombing Science did, and they asked him about the meaning behind his name. He believes that you find salvation in believing in Christ and declaring Christ to be your Savior. And his way of spreading the word is going out there and bombing, hitting trains, hitting tags, hitting anything that he feels like hitting to spread this message. And you might ask me if I feel the same, and I would tell you, absolutely not. But with that said, do I feel like what he's doing is invalid? And the answer to that is no. I have a lot of love for it. And at the end of the day, we're all writers and we're all in this thing together. And what somebody else's expression means to them doesn't have to mean a damn thing to me. And somebody simply calling God a different name is not enough for me to invalidate what they do or invalidate them as a person. And you guys can step to me and talk to me about anything, any kind of interpretation, what you believe in, what you don't believe in, and I'm gonna consider you one of my folks and give you the time of day. And we have to understand how special this thing is that binds us all together. And we have to come together and really share our feelings, share our beliefs, and understand what this thing means to us and why we do it. And for anybody that's willing to explore this further, that wants to talk about it further, hit me up. I'd love to have the conversation with you. And I'd love to have the conversation in subsequent videos. At the end of the day, faith, graffiti, love, all these irrational things all come from the same place, and we all live with them, and they're worth looking at, talking about.